This is the crazy story of the inception of the C5 Corvette and how it was saved by one gentleman, Jim Perkins, this guy. This was definitely a David and Goliath type story, if you will. I really like these kinds of tales. It really gives depth to the Corvette brand and all the trials and tribulations it's been through to get where it is today. And without the C5, it would not be what we have now. So I really appreciate it. This story, it's really neat. And I want to take a few minutes and share it with you guys, because I think it's worth sharing. So enjoy. So by the mid-90s, the C4 was aging, not terribly. It's just the market was saturated. There's so many of them made. It was at the limits of its performance. The ZR1 was a nice car, way overpriced for the segment for what it was. And at the time, General Motors didn't feel a need to move forward with the Corvette. This is about 92, 93 they made this decision. Now, if you're familiar with Zora, he's kind of like the father of the Corvette. And up until now, before he retired, Zora was always like, no, I want to keep this going. And he had a good rapport with the brass at GM. And they were always like, all right. The Corvette never really, up until this point, was never a huge profit maker for GM. It was simply a halo car of what the brand is capable of. And they kept that going up until 92, 93, when the big wigs at GM were like, you know, we're done with the Corvette. So they pretty much took all the money allotted to what would have been the 5th gen Corvette, or what is the 5th gen Corvette, and put it towards their mid-size segment, which is pretty hard to believe, if, you know, think about. I think it was like Bonneville and the Oldsmobile brand even was taking money from Corvette. That's so crazy. Like, now look at that. What happened, what transpired, it's nuts. But yeah, long story short, they were gonna scrap Corvette for a much more higher volume type situation. So enter Joe Spielman. At the time, he was running the mid-sized car division at GM, and he was a Corvette enthusiast. And he saw what was going on, and he really did not want to see the Corvette go out the way it was going, the way it was heading at the time. So then he reaches out to Jim Perkins for help. The president of GM at the time, Lloyd Roos, I think I'm saying that right, told him that we needed capital from Corvette team to fully pump into the mid-size segment. Bonneville, the Sabre, the 88, yeah, kind of depressing. And look at those cars now, they're all gone, you know, it's crazy. So Spielman kind of went rogue, and he reached out to Russ McLean. He was the director of manufacturing for GM in Mexico, and desperately asked him, hey dude, can you get back up here? I need you to help me save the Corvette. I'm sure more happened than just that, but in a roundabout way, that's kind of what happened. When McLean was interviewed by Car and Driver, early 90s, he told them that the Corvette's not gonna happen. It's a very low priority. The Corvette at the time was losing GM money. GM had no money. They were desperately trying to find any money anywhere for any division at the time. All right, now keep in mind, at this time, around 94, 95, Dave Hill was the chief engineer for the Corvette team, and they were already working on what would become the C5 Corvette. As you know, it was a longer wheelbase, rear-mounted transaxle, which is revolutionary, and they used it up until just 2 years ago. So to keep things moving on that, Perkins tapped into the Chevy's marketing budget as a whole and granted them about $1 million, which is not a lot of money in R&D for any car development. So Perkins, as the Corvette team still needed more funds to get a mule working, Perkins kept trying to siphon money here, from here, $500,000 here, kind of a just a crack team effort, and kept pumping as much as he could into the Corvette R&D. Roughly $3 million was given to them, inflated to now it's roughly $10 million they had to work with to make a prototype, if you will, which is like a shoestring budget, less than that. It's crazy how much money they had to work with to make the C5 a reality. So the original C5 Corvette was all the original pieces of what the C5 Corvette we know now under a C4 platform. So it was kind of interesting. So at this time, they were 90 days out from the North American Strategy Board concept approval meeting. So Hill told them, hey guys, we have 90 days to get this thing a working model. So they got creative and actually used a third party to help them outside of the shop. They got this raggedy C4 body with the underpinnings of a C5. They went out to Mesa, Arizona, the proving grounds, if you will, and everyone was blown away at the rigidity of this new platform, how balanced it was with the rear transaxle. They couldn't believe what they were able to do with the budget they had, and that kind of started selling people on the idea of a C5 Corvette, and this thing could be marketable and it could be profitable. So as it started getting this reputation of what it could be, brass started taking notice. Perkins finally got a meeting with Russ and some of the other top execs who had a heart-to-heart, if you will, why the Corvette should continue its legacy. They weren't happy, the higher-ups, but they did greenlight it, but they were very, very reluctant to say okay, but they did. So they got approval to make a full concept of pretty much what we know now as the C5. Perkins, to help make his case for the GM brass, he had his entire team go through automotive magazines from 1953 up until that day and just kind of prove the legacy of what Corvette is to the higher-ups that are kind of detached from what makes Corvette a great halo car and an American dream, if you will. And there was over 800 publications that had Corvette as a headliner on magazines, and they really proved that Corvette was an American brand that the people needed to rally behind. It was an icon that he thought they had no right to cancel, and he was right, in my opinion. So when the strategy board decision came around, they revived the program, and they finally started making what we know now, production car, around 1995. And up until now, the C5 Corvette in the 90s was their most profitable car. It was a gamble, and they won big. Come C6, they knew what they had, and they didn't really reinvent the wheel. They took this awesome architecture that was built on a shoestring budget and just kind of refined it, if you will. Between the C5 and C6, it really comes down to looks, really. The engineering is very similar, the interior is different, it's a little more chiseled, but drivability, almost the same. And they were smart to do that. And there's also a similar case of the C7, which if you guys enjoy this video, I'll do a similar type, quick little rundown of what happened to the C7, how it almost never came about. Because when it was starting its development, the entire world was ending with the economic collapse of 2008-9-ish when they were starting R&D on that. So that's also a very interesting story. So yeah, there you have it. The C5 was almost never a thing until people that worked at GM thought it needed to be saved. It almost kind of turned into just a whole bunch of mid-sized boring cars that aren't even a thing anymore. It's crazy to think, you know? And without the C5, we wouldn't have the C8 right now. Hopefully it'll stick around for a while. Corvette brand in some kind of capacity, being a hybrid, or it's going to be electric eventually one day. Still have a gasoline variant for a while, which is cool. So hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video. I thought it was a neat little story. I wanted to share it with you guys. And yeah guys, go enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Later.